You might prove anything by figures. So said Thomas Carlyle in his 1839 essay on statistics in his book Chartism. And like so much of Carlyle's writing, this essay,
fiery and incendiary.
Yeah, but it's become only more relevant as time has passed and our civilization has aged. It's been 138 years, and the criticisms that he levels in this essay are only more true now than they were then. So Carlyle's point is summed up in the following quotation. So the condition of the working man in this country, what it is and has been, whether it is improving or retrograding, is a question to which, from statistics hitherto, no solution can be got. Hitherto, after many tables and statements, one is still left mainly to what he can ascertain by his own eyes, looking at the concrete phenomenon for himself. So in other words, statistics, or abstractions more generally, they can't give us a solution. They can't tell us what we ought to do. And moreover, they don't actually paint a truly comprehensive picture of the world as it is. It doesn't get at the essence of the thing, is what Carlyle says. So in the case of the working man, Carlyle contends that while statistics may show his condition to be improving, if you go out and walk in the streets, you'll see the actual reality as it was on the ground with your own eyes. So this leads us nicely into the exchange that inspired this segment. So a certain Akkadian king here and a chap who goes by Monitoring Bias have been going back and forth on this topic. And I think that this is an important issue for us to discuss because, I don't know, it's a conversation that's ongoing within the right, and it's something that we need to actually
So
have an
Monitoring
answer to.
Bias is somebody that I don't follow, but I've seen a number of his posts, and he can be very, very hit and miss. I've seen him post some information and data that was very interesting and very revealing, and I've seen him in this exchange where he was not very good, if I'm perfectly honest. I never thought I would see anybody unironically talking about the progressive bent of history.
Well, part of the reason I think is, and this is something that I think you're going to get to, is what heuristic do we have for what constitutes a good life? Is it a top-down imposition, the managing of all resources, the turning of the world into standard reserve that you can take out of its environment, put on a shelf, take back off, and put elsewhere? Or is it being embedded time, place, and accepting our constraints and living within them? This is something that we were talking about in a contemplations that me, Josh, and Rory did in environmentalism. And we said that even the right's approach to the environment, which is, okay, all we need to do is develop technologies to reduce pollution, and then we can have abundant energy, and that still has the conceit that the making space for nature approach, which will alienate us from living in a time, place, and tradition, just because it itemizes and manages everything rather than living presently within it. And that seems to be the perspective here is, okay, if we live by numbers, then we're distant from the actual products of what we produce by our interventions. Whereas if we live embedded and on the ground and talk about how we feel about living presently in the thing, then we're much more connected to what we end up doing.
Yeah. Well, Michael Oakeshott is another thinker alongside Carlyle who's going to sort of reign over this conversation because, again, I'd come across this Monitoring Bias guy before. Don't follow him. But he does really come across as one of Oakeshott's rationalists, an I effing love science type character.
Burke's Men of Letters.
Yeah. Well, not even that because...
Potential real-life soy jack.
Yeah. The interesting thing, because Carlyle actually disagrees with Burke about Men of Letters. He says that Men of Letters are actually an important and essential component of a movement.
Well, a Man of Letter doesn't need to be a rationalist.
No, that's right.
Carlyle himself and Burke would both be considered Men of Letters.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think just dismissing them outright.
But they can be when they're in the revolutionary tradition.
Once again, dismissing all forms of rationalism, dismissing all forms of data retrieval and such is also very silly because you can use these things to get a good understanding of the world around you. You can't just... But the problem is when you use only statistics and only data to understand the world without going out and seeing the actual conditions that people live in.
When you're commanded to ignore the patterns that you personally notice because there's a number in front of you.
Like for instance, a recent statistic that I saw when Callum was covering it on the podcast was that I believe, don't worry guys, house prices have finally gone down for the first time in years by 0.1%.
We're saved.
Fantastic. So if I plotted that on a graph and you're looking at it from a bias perspective, this is a positive trend. This is a new positive trend. If you go out into the world and see whether people are actually able to buy houses or not, and to be fair, you can gather information on this as well, it still doesn't look that great.
No, it doesn't. And on the topic of the actual conditions that people are living in, we're going to go through this exchange just briefly because it's the two positions being represented are I think, again, that's really important to discuss. So Carl says, rich men north of Richmond hits all the right beats about the current state of the modern world. Everything is indeed in decline. Our money is worth less, and everyone has less of it, even while they're working harder than ever. The rich people in charge think that normal folk don't understand that the rich are purposefully ruining their country, but people are completely aware. They just don't know what to do about it, and it's making them feel the way the tone of the song conveys. The people in charge are obsessed with data because they do want total control. They want to use their mastery of technology to leave nothing outside of their perception. Who doesn't have an old soul that misses the old world where your thoughts were your own? They can see that lazy moochers and victim interest groups are raised above the concerns of the regular folk, and that there is an injustice contained in such a state of affairs. What else is there to do but drown your sorrows to forget your woes? The rich men north of Richmond just expect them to carry this burden and accept their place at the bottom as the world around them grows worse and any light that might make the future look bright grows dim. It's no wonder such a soulful song would be a viral sensation in times like this. Things are bleak, and it's evident who is behind it, and that they aren't going to get any better anytime soon.
That's quite a nice summation of it. And before we go into any other details, I just want to clear something up, because I don't think we've spoken about this song on the account, on the website.
I was going to ask you guys what you thought of it, yeah.
And I just wanted to say, I understand that it's a little bit polarized for people. Obviously, it's become somewhat of a viral sensation. Hey, there's Auron. Nice to see him there.
Good on Calvin.
He enjoys it. Calvin enjoys it as well. That's really good to see the support. Some people don't like this style of music, this kind of very simple bluegrass country style. I really like the song. I think there is something to be said for a simple 4-chord song with a soulful lyric and a catchy melody over the top of it. And I know some people also don't like the country twang that he affects in his voice. I would imagine, given that this appears to be Appalachia, where he's performing from, this might just be his
how
accent
he speaks,
and how he speaks. There's a wonderful authenticity to it that I appreciate, and it's nice to hear a song in this style, which is supposed to be conveying the authentic emotions of the average man, that actually is conveying the emotions of the average man, because there's this thing called bro country or mainstream country, which is just shiny production talking about, I'm going to drink my beers, I'm going to drive my truck.
It's basically like Yellowstone conservatism.
Yeah.
Oh, God, yeah.
That's not what it should be.
Yeah, but back to Schmidt, like, you know, the right just needs to understand friend enemy. We gain nothing for putting this guy down.
No.
He's saying things that we all agree with, and it's a popular song. People are liking it. It's resonating. Let's just take the win.
He's
right?
reading Bible verses at the opening of his performance.
Exactly.
Good man.
Exactly. So, on to the exchange then. So, this monitoring bias chap replies.
Oh, God.
Just press back. Top.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, guys.
Right.
Never trust the Northerner with tech. Anyway, sorry.
Hey.
So he fires back with, everything is indeed in decline. Lamau, in the US, wages are now rising faster than inflation, and the unemployment rate is 3.5.
Inflation is a relative rate of change metric, so it's slightly less worse than it was progressing last year, but it's still worse. There is a reason why Bill Gates has on his shelf How to Lie with Statistics as one of his favorite books.
Yep.
Because the elite manipulate numbers to lie to you, and you've fallen for it, you midwit.
This is the kind of guy who would go, but look at the GDP, though, and ignore that GDP also takes in government spending, which isn't any marker of productivity.
But how does this
We'll get
affect
to
you
that. We'll get to
personally
that.
as the Rome falls behind you?
But the government threw $3 trillion into the ocean, and that went on their expense account. So GDP went up this year, guys.
But it's just, I mean, again, you know, Carl, you know, every word is symphony as far as I'm concerned with what he said. And then this guy just fires back with, aren't you aware that the unemployment rate is 3.5?
But look at this graph, and graphs can be great and graphs can be useful.
All right, Nickelback.
Well, once again, it would be hypocritical of us to say otherwise, because oftentimes we use data and statistics when we're looking at figures surrounding migration. But you always have to be careful when you look into who's collecting these statistics and how are they using the statistics. Are they leaving figures out? Like we always talk about, the employment rate in the UK is said to be at record lows because we've got just so many people employed and so many jobs that need to be filled. That's why we need to bring in all of these migrants. Where we don't realize, or at least most people don't realize, that the employment figures leave out economic inactivity of people who are in university, people who are taking early retirements, people who are on benefits and other such things. So there are a lot of people who aren't in work in the UK who could be working but aren't factored in so that the government can manufacture consent for migration. So it's really important, if you're going to use statistics, to look properly into these statistics.
Absolutely. So Carl comes back with, again, representing the Carlisle position, just look around you, man.
Yeah.
And
but Manchester's an incredibly rich city. Who cares if there's crack addicts smoking crack in the middle of the street?
So this monitoring bias chap comes back with, I prefer the actual data to your look around you, man, approach to economic analysis. So again, it's just the same argument.
Okay, so what this graph that he's shows us is that earnings took a massive dip and inflation did this massively over. But now, because this is happening, we're supposed to be happy. So what this is showing to me is that for this entire period here, we had a period of insane inflation where it will probably take years and years of this shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and wages going up and up and up for us to even catch up to what the wage to inflation rates would have been previous to the COVID period.
Even more upset? The reason that they're shrinking is because they keep taking goods out of the basket that allows them to calculate the average. So I believe in America they actually took house prices out of the basket. Right. And over in the UK, when I think it was May, when they said, inflation's fallen by about 3% in this time last year, it's because they put the energy price cap guarantee in. So we're paying to keep the energy prices at the rate that they are in tax. We're still paying for it. But just compared to this time last year when they were really high and rising, it's a lot less. So they're just manipulating the stats.
Yep. So, you might prove anything by figures.
But just to put it in more concrete terms, say you like a Twix. Do they get Twixes in America?
I have no idea.
Twix is a lovely chocolate bar. They're very nice.
Yeah,
I enjoy
agreed.
a Twix every now and again if I'm feeling cheeky. And say you've got a Twix and you want to buy a Twix, and a Twix has gone up maybe 50% in price. So that's all. That's gone up 50% in price over the past few years, and your wages have stagnated. But now your wages have gone up 0.05% while the Twix is still, on average, inflating. I'm still spending far more per Twix than I was before and earning only a little bit more. And even then, my wages are worth less than they were a few years ago.
The line's going up.
But according to this chart, that means that that's a good thing, which means that years from now, my wages might catch up to where a Twix would cost in real terms the same as it did a few years ago. But in that time, inflation is still happening.
Indeed. So let's see. There we are. So Carl says that he's speaking about observable reality, and the monitoring bias is speaking about abstractions. Who cares what the unemployment rate is if people are struggling to get by when they have a job? Who cares about the hourly earnings? Who cares what the hourly earnings are if they can hardly afford rent? The world is decaying around us. There is no refuge to be found in data. We can see the decrepit nature of the buildings, the disgusting nature of the streets, the moral failings of the people, and the lies of the elite. The West is falling apart.
This is something important that we were discussing off air. And this is what is going to be remembered as well.
Yes.
Because during the industrial age, this is always the point that people talk about. The bar of progress has gone since the industrial age, of where people were subsisting on less than $1 a day, and now 80% of that poverty has been eliminated. Okay, but what is the memory of the industrial age? It is the narratives that came out of it. It's the narratives that, frankly, Marx and Engels put in Conditions of the Working Class in England and in Capital, where and even in Orwell's Road to Wigan Pier, where the woman is sticking a stick up a foul drain pipe, or a mother is sedating her baby as it's in the factory with her with opiates, or even in Blake's London, where the smogs and chimney stacks are just oppressive, and they're filling the sky with miasma. And so that's what is the driving force for change. This is why Oliver Twist, Charles Dickens' novels, and Bleak House as well, their depictions of the workhouses and the chancery courts led to poor law reform and the consolidation of the courts into a more streamlined system that allowed people to get redress rather than having their inheritances burned up while it's being contested. So these statistics, these graphs, these figures, yes, they might be useful policy analysts in the moment, but it's actually the emotive power of how people feel in a time and place that is the real driver of substantial change.
And this is exactly the point that Carlyle makes in this essay, Statistics. He says that, the reign of quantity idea, looking at mere quantity, numbers, things that can be expressed in statistics, it almost doesn't matter in a way, because it doesn't get at the quality of the thing, doesn't get at the quality of the city, for example, where, there is just the buildings are decrepit and the people they look sullen and heavy and as if they have a great burden on them. You can't express that in numbers, the quantitative language of science.
Well, even if you wanted to equate it into numbers, I think this Jesse person who commented underneath it brings up a good point.
This is a great point. Yeah.
Is this one of those inflation charts where they exclude unimportant things like houses, cars, and food? I've never made so much money and been able to afford so little. I could not even buy the house I live in if I had to purchase it at its current value. Many such cases, my parents and other people their age and people like them bought their houses for, it would have been new builds back in the late 1990s. So this would have been maybe 80, 90,000 pounds. And their next door neighbours are now looking to sell their house, which would have cost them about that much, for about 450,000 pounds.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. Oh, I mean, the house hasn't changed. It's still the same structure it was. It's a bit different on the inside because they decorated it. It's still the same size garden. The neighborhood's pretty much the same. There's a bit less countryside next to it because we've built more housing estates since then. But the prices more than doubled.
I'm told
more than doubled.
something
Tripled.
happened. Something happened in the late 90s?
Something might have happened.
Tom Harwood will get round to it one day, I'm sure.
So, on to the next response then. So, never respond to an empirical claim made by a trad account with population-level data, because data are abstractions and definitely not observable reality.
Sorry, is he calling Carl a trad account?
Yeah.
Carl
No.
a trad account. He's got some trad-ish tendencies.
He says postmodern traditionalist.
Yeah.
He's not a trad account. That's just, no.
I still don't know what half of these bloody terms mean nowadays.
Yeah. So it's far better to rely upon one's lived experience or culture war groupthink or the tweeted personal anecdotes being algorithmically fed to you, or better yet, on vibe, which are, of course, as any social scientist will tell you, the leading indicators of observable reality.
Well, I mean, if you get a feel for the atmosphere of a place, that's all of your senses taking in the observable reality at once.
Yes.
We spoke about Schmidt in the first segment. This is it. This is putting things beyond political reproach. This is just saying this is the trajectory of progress. This is the trajectory of travel. And Carl is saying what you're doing by not observing the on-the-ground reality and just falling back on numbers is you're blind to the existential threats that are emerging from the midst, which, I mean, Schmidt phrased it as the Antichrist. Carl saying this is going to disintegrate the social texture and therefore the prosperity on which it rests of your civilization, while you look at your spreadsheet and try and convince yourself that things are still going okay. You cannot put things in a category that are beyond debate or criticism, because then you are blind to the errors that will undo everything you want.
Well, this is just the classic Tony Blair thing of, well, globalization is inevitable.
Yeah,
it's
like the change of the seasons.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. And no, it's not. No. It was a choice. It was a specific political choice made by his administration that we are living the consequences of.
I mean,
now.
that was also just a logical follow-up of what Thatcher had done to liberalise the economy as well, and
technological
to international investment.
Yeah. So he finishes, you see, data won't give you the kind of insight into civilizational decline that a good firm set of beliefs can provide. These people are religionists filled with a deep sense of doom. The unmistakable arc of human progress is totally lost.
And that was the most disappointing thing that I saw. The unmistakable arc of human progress. Okay. Well, I mean, if we're going by pure numbers, I suppose increase in crime rates, that's progress of a sort. Increase in rape, that's a progress of a sort, I suppose. So if you're going purely by number go up equal good thing, yeah, there are plenty of things happening in Western civilization right now that are good. Also, the idea of calling other people religionists, I'm sorry to break this to you, this is something that a lot of scientists do recognize and need to recognize, which is that there is a good deal of faith that goes into accepting the conclusions of any science in the first place. Because what you are doing, you're taking the faith claim that the scientist who collected all of this data is, one, taken in the data on good faith, and two, presenting you the data in good faith and not added his own personal biases to it. So there's a great deal of faith that goes into this.
We'll also see the religion of science that Sam Harris has fallen under the spell of. But you reminded me of a great example before I stopped derailing your segment, mate, which is Steven Pinker's Better Angels of Our Nature. It's the perfect exercise in manipulating
data. It's going to come up later.
Oh, is it? Brilliant. Yeah. Okay. Do you reach the same conclusion where essentially he decides to say, well, a reduction in violence shows moral progress. And it's like, right. So if you look at the fascist states of 1930s Germany, does that mean they're better because they got rid of more crime, mate? Because that might not be the conclusion you reach in Enlightenment
on a certain metric.
Yeah,
so we
might want to value other metrics in that case, I think.
Indeed.
Also, he was cherry picking a lot of his data points.
Yeah, he also suggested the novel led to a leap in moral improvement, and that's why he
also completely ignores the development of medical technology, which means that violent attacks are now on average less fatal than they were back in the data back in the times where he's taking a lot of his medieval data from.
Yeah, it's also,
if you got stabbed in the 1200s, you had a hell of a lot less likely chance of surviving than if you get stabbed now.
and also the rates of data collection and storage, and the literacy rates that criminals would have versus the regular population. So maybe they wouldn't have been able to read Jane Austen and Charles Dickens, which filled them all with warm and fuzzy inside sentiments to stop them just mindlessly stabbing people, I suppose.
Also, Steven Pinker danced in a really cringe way when Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. But we could dunk on Steven Pinker for hours.
Yes.
But thank you at least for the blank slate. That was a good one.
Okay. Anyway, so we'll move on. But you've raised both of you, some very important points there. So first of all, I want to point you towards this article that Carl wrote, because it basically sums up his point, which is that the decline, you can feel it when you walk through the streets. You can't prove a spiritual malaise with statistics,
but it's tangible.
But when you go to Swindon town centre and you breathe in, you look around and you just think, wow,
yeah,
we used to be a good country.
I smell pigeon.
Wow, is that open
surrounded by Moroccans?
Yeah.
Great.
But again, like the point of like sensory, getting a sense of the thing is really important, because you walk through the streets of anywhere, you can smell the weed, you can smell the sewage, you can see the boarded up shops and so on. Yeah.
If you go to a lovely little isolated town in the countryside and breathe it in, you can smell the fresh air and how open and natural everything is.
For now, yeah. But you
say for now, please. I'm trying to be positive.
Yes, indeed. But you talked about faith there, and about how even the scientism position is built on faith. And a discussion that I want us to have here briefly is about basically the argument that all political beliefs and all beliefs and behavior in general is human behavior, human beliefs. It's just fundamentally irrational. But we have this deep need to rationalize it after the fact. And that political positions are essentially built on myths, not facts. And that most people, when you present them with so-called facts or statistics and so on, they will just dismiss them because of where they came from, who collected them, and just look for data that supports their own position.
Well, this is almost Haidt's idea of that.
That's exactly right.
Most things are post hoc rationalizations. You can actually invert Carol Hanish's feminist tract that says the personal is political. Well, no, actually, most politics are downstream of personality.
Yes.
And most people are just looking to the data and whatever misrepresented statistic they can find, because they're only half literate and aren't reading meta-analyses anyway, to try and buttress their pre-existing point. They're just trying to beat you over the head into a conclusion that they hope you are going to be gaslit into thinking is inevitable.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to think that statistics, in the final analysis, the function of statistics in politics is they're just essentially a weapon that you use to attack another person's belief system. Because, I don't know, you can make an appeal to truth and an appeal to reality when you're trying to take somebody else down. But your beliefs, fundamentally, I think, are built on, again, what Pareto would call sentiments. These things that you don't have rational control over.
Things that normal and sensible people believe. That's generally how
instincts.
You view your own beliefs.
Yeah, just instincts.
It's the kind of thing we've been stripped from the education system that C.S. Lewis criticized the Green Book for at the start of the abolition of man, of where if they can get you to believe that everything you feel about the natural world, that the natural world actually conjures up from within you as a shared human experience, is just your artificial projection on the natural world, then they can substitute that with the sentiment that they would prefer you to have.
Yes.
They can steward you towards their preferred utopia.
Yeah.
Again, it's just gaslighting. That's all it is.
Exactly right. And on gaslighting, I think, what Carlyle addressed in Chartism and in this essay Statistics is what he called the condition of England question. This was a big debate that was happening at the time about the effect of the Industrial Revolution on the working class of England, and how, again, all the statistics were saying that things can only get better. But the actual lived reality on the ground was that things were getting worse. And as you say, the actual qualitative data we have, stories and anecdotes and so on, from that time suggests exactly that it was a bad time, for the working classes. And I think that we have a version of the condition of England question confronting us today. But instead of being the Industrial Revolution, it's the kind of the globalist revolution, if you want, and specifically mass immigration and the effect that that's having on our country. Because again, we're told by the powers that be that these are all only ever net positives because line go up. But actually we see,
can only get better.
Yeah, it's like,
I can see how you were kicked out of your band.
I wasn't the singer.
It's probably a smart choice.
Yeah. But we walk around the streets, we all recognize that things are getting worse. Everybody knows this. Again, Carl, in his article, The Decline, he says about how he speaks to people, taxi drivers and so on, and says, how do you, in general, not prompting them in any particular way, how do you think that things are going at the moment? And almost all the time, they will say, "Well, things are going down." And I've had the same experience.
Outpouring of misery.
Yeah.
I always
That's right. All the foreign taxi drivers are like, I came to work in England. I'm not in England.
Yeah.
It's mainly Nigerian dads and sort of Gen X boomer working class white guys that unanimously say Sadiq Khan's ruining London. Everything's really expensive, and they're coming out with all this.
Then
woke
stop
nonsense.
voting for him.
But they're mainly not, though. They're not. It's you know which constituencies are mainly voting for Sadiq Khan. It's why he wants to import more of them.
Yeah, and that's not a threat to democracy.
No, but to anchor it back to the point, it's that you can only take a perspective on the Industrial Revolution being an unmitigated good if you consider all of those anecdotes from those poor people as cannon fodder necessary for progress. So you can have absolutely no complaint about the state of your civilization while the international managerial class are bussing millions of people from the third world in to create a homogenous state at the moment. Because if you take that perspective on the past, then you are just more cannon fodder for the utopia they're trying to institute. So actually, yeah, you do have to talk about on the ground how you feel about your place in history and how it is not determined according to the globalist trajectory.
And this is where Oakeshott comes in, because the actual form of the condition of England question in the Victorian era and today is the same. It's the elite are telling us something, appealing to statistics, but we, the people, can see that what they're saying is not true. And that, I think, we can put down to essentially rationalism, what we today call managerialism.
Yes.
This attitude that the only knowledge that matters is that which can be expressed in the quantitative language of science. And there's technical knowledge, and that practical knowledge, i.e. knowledge that can't be written in a book and expressed in language, something that's about the feel of the thing, the experience of the thing, something that takes time to cultivate.
The kind you get driving around London and just looking at it as a cab driver.
Yeah. None of that's real. It doesn't exist.
I'm going to take a different tact on this to speak for the members of our audience who are presumably screaming right now and say that were it not that our leaders and those in charge of the scientific professions were spiteful mutants and instead incredibly based and used rationalistic methods to actually follow the data to the conclusions that it actually leads to, rather than to justify their lefty, gay predispositions, then science could and would be an incredible force for good that could take us to the based stars, and we could have the Hitchens Britocracy up on Mars.
You'd still be alienated from the land which you've micromanaged.
It would come with its own problems, but if we had people who actually cared about the scientific method and believed in the conclusions that a lot of uncomfortable science and uncomfortable elements of science lead you to, then we could find ourselves in a good position.
Better position, but not the perfect one. So you need to beware.
Not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, my friend.
Yes, but the technical knowledge mindset that has infected the managers is that the idea they can steward us to perfection if only they get the right data. So we need to err away from that.
I agree with you, Connor. Sorry, Harry.
No, that's
I see what you're saying.
That's absolutely fine.
It's a good
I'm just
point.
saying, if we had based science instead of cringe science that we have right now, then we could do many good things.
And I agree that it would be better. But again, ultimately, it does come down, because, you imagine the based
I'm not
science.
giving up toothpaste. I'm sorry.
Fair enough.
Probably got fluoride in it.
I use non-fluoride toothpaste.
Okay, well,
based. But you imagine, the based sort of scientific rulers that you're talking about. It still won't have been the science, looking at the science, that will have had them arrive at the positions they did.
Do you not look at the Imperium, Warhammer, and think, God, that would be so cool?
Well, yeah, yes, again, but the point is not. It comes down to the individual people occupying the positions of power. The science doesn't matter. But the point is, you're right.
We're really running over time, and I'm just thinking we need to get to my segment, so I don't mean to derail too badly.
That's all right. We'll spin on. But I think the point is, what matters, again, back to Schmidt, is the individual people occupying the positions of power. The science is neither here nor there. But anyway, I think that the point that this is all driving at is the idea of lived experience. Because Mr. Monitoring Bias, he says that lived experience is a BS metric that doesn't matter. But actually, what Carlyle is talking about in Chartism, and what you were talking about when you were appealing to the sort of Dickensian vision of Victorian England, that is lived experience. That's the lived experience of the English community. And I don't think we should give that concept up to the left, because the constituencies that they appeal to when they talk about lived experience are completely meaningless, like the LGBT community, the black community. Yeah. Like these are just mindless categoricals. Whereas the English community, that's a category that actually has some moral and What would you say?
They're situated in the time and place and therefore have legitimacy. We can point to them.
Yeah, we occupy a geographical space. We share a history. We share a language, and we share an experience. The English, the English way of life is a thing. It's a distinct thing that exists in the world. And if we can't look at the lived experience of the English community and derive conclusions about what we should do, well, what are we going to do? Like, where do we get our conclusions from, if not that? Anyway, I think we can leave it there because we are running over, as you rightly pointed out. But the point is, statistics are not the whole story, and you shouldn't rely on these kind of rationalistic methods. And actually, an aesthetic, qualitative experience is the best place to derive your conclusions about the world from.
Thank you very much for watching this segment from the podcast Lotus Eaters. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you feel like supporting the work that we do, then you can subscribe to our website for as little as £5 per month to get access to all of the premium work that we do on there, including the most recent book club that I've been part of, Julius Evoler's Fascism Viewed from the Right, where I had a very interesting discussion with Carl. If you'd like to catch up with what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, you can follow my social medias on Twitter at Harry Lotus Eater and also on Getter at Harry Lotus Eater. Thank you again for watching, and take care.